Welcome to this video of the Media Technology Master of Science program at Leiden University. You're about to view a presentation recorded at the Master's Open Day. It was recorded in 2018 and since then small changes may have been made to our program. So make sure to check out the current course list on our website. A link to our website can be found in the description of this video. Enjoy the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for being here. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Maarten Lamers. I'm one of the assistant professors associated with the Media Technology program. I work for the Leiden Institute of Advanced Computer Science. I have a few colleagues here, Etten van der Heijden and Tessa Verhoef. And I have two of our students, Giulio Barbero and Arianna Freni, both from Italy, coincidentally, but that's a coincidence. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Media Technology program, and this will take roughly half an hour. Then, in the end, feel free to ask me any questions. There will be a question and answer session, and you can also ask questions to my colleagues or to my students, or see us in the hallway and share a cup of coffee with us and ask any other questions that you have. To introduce the Media Technology program, I'm going to start with a graduation project by one of our students, a guy called Rinus Bot. And roughly 2 years ago, Rinus walked into my office. And as every MediaTech student, he had to come up with his own graduation research. So at the end of the program, you have to do a research, a full research from start to finish yourself. And you have to come up with the ID for the research yourself. You do not go to a professor and ask for an ID. No, you come up with it yourself. So he walked into my office and said, "Martin, I want to control a swarm of birds. You know these swarms in the sky that you see? I want to control it with my drone. I want to be able to steer this swarm of birds via my drone in the air." That's quite an ambitious plan, I have to say. And so I talked to him, and one of the things we discussed was, where are you going to find these swarms of birds? You have to be at the right place at the right moment, and you have no idea when or where that is. So that's the tricky research to do. But what we then typically do in our program is, it's not about this particular thing that he wants, it's about his personal interest. What is the interest of this particular student, in this case Rinus Bot? And when we talked about it, it was clear that he had a strong interest in the interaction between drones, because he was a drone flyer, and birds in the wild. So we talked about studying that in a different way than controlling big swarms of birds. And so we defined a new study. Basically, he defined a new study. And his study materials were relatively simple. No fancy equipment. He used an off-the-shelf drone, a simple pair of a simple kitchen scale, a tripod with a cheap camera, his phone, some mealworms, some bird feed, and a few batteries for his drone. And what he did was the following. He set up his camera on the tripod. This is an image from the small camera in a park in Rotterdam, Euromast Park in downtown Rotterdam. And he did that every morning at 6 o'clock. He went there, set up the camera, and then put a container with worms here, spread some birdseed around, and just waited for 2 hours. For 1 week, he did that every morning. And the birds would quickly learn. 6 o'clock in the morning, there's a tall, lanky student feeding us. Let's go there. So after 1 week, more and more birds would collect around this place where he was. Not really many, but more than at the beginning. And then after that first week, he did something special. And what he did was he continued. He kept going there every morning at 6 o'clock from 6 to 8 for 3 weeks. But after the first week, he did something additional. What he did is he set himself 95 meters away over there. You can't really see him, but he's there in the image. And he would be waiting. And the moment a bird like these geese here, or this magpie over here, would enter into what he called a feeding zone, which is this patch of grass. At that moment, he would run a small computer program, the equivalent of throwing a die, and it came out with one of three options. Option number one was, if that happened, he would take up his drone, fly to a height of 5 meters, and go down again. That was it. 95 meters away, over there. If it was option number two, he would fly up the drone for 5 meters and straightly attack the birds. Fly straight at the feeding zone, fly back, and land again. And if it was option number 3, he would fly up, not straight at the feeding zone, but tangential in a flyby movement. Just past the feeding zone and then fly back and land again. And he would record the exact time when he did this. Then, after doing this for 3 weeks, 2 hours every morning, actually he did this every day, so every afternoon, he analyzed the video footage. He would film this. And he would analyze exactly the frame numbers in the video in which a bird would appear in the feeding zone and at which moment it would take off, fly away. And why did he do this? Because it gave him very meticulous information about at what moment a bird did what. And he also recorded exactly at what moment his drone did what. So he could draw a parallel, draw a relation, investigate a relation, research it, study it. He could study how different species of birds would react to different maneuvers of his drone. And this was a thesis called Effects of Standardized Drone Flight Patterns on Foraging Birds. Well, if you do a thesis like this, it seems logical. It seems more like a biology project, right? Well, that's typically something that happens in the MediaTech program. A student wants to study something, comes up with an idea. Then I was the advisor for this thesis work, for this research. But we always have a second advisor. And that's typically someone from outside the MediaTech program who's more like a domain specialist. So in this case, it was Catharine Riebel from the biology department. And she explained to us that this kind of data, reactions of specific species of birds to specific maneuvers by a drone, doesn't exist in the world yet. Rinus was the first one to investigate this particular interaction between technology and animals in the wild. And this is really an interesting study that a student came up with that is very valued, at least very valuable information that was not yet present in the world. He came up with it, he executed it, he just did it. This is typically something from the MediaTech program, because when you look at the program, it deals with being creative in an academic environment. So we really work in an academic environment. We're at a classic university, we do research. Our students do research. They're trained as academics, but creative academics. We like a playful approach. We just like it. As a method of working, why not? We take things very seriously. We do very serious academic work, but we do look for the playful opportunities in there. And the research that we do, that our students do, that they do with our staff, is personally inspired. It's the students who come up with the questions, not the staff. We don't come up with research questions and tell our students, maybe you want to study this, maybe you want to study this, or you should study this. No. It's the students who have personal inspirations, who have questions, and then we challenge them to investigate it, to do actual academic research into this. And another example of such a work, another research project by a student, was done by a student called Maarten Lodewijk. And it was 2 years ago, roughly, that Maarten told me that he had heard of a study by a lady called Robin Rosenberg from California. And what Robin had studied, so not our student, but this Californian lady, was the following. She had placed participants in a virtual reality environment. And a virtual reality environment was basically a first-person view flight over a city. So the test subjects were wearing a virtual reality helmet and could see themselves, they didn't have to do much, they could just stood still, could see themselves flying over a city from a first-person view, could look around like this over the city. All the test participants, but half of them just stood like this, arms down. The other half were forced to keep their arms up. They had little sensors in their hand, and once they raised them, the motion in the virtual environment started. The other ones could just stand like this and were passively flown around. So half the people stood like this, half the people stood like this. Then what she did, what Robin Rosenberg did in California, was the following. She asked, after these participants had flown over the city, she asked them to fill in the questionnaire, a paper questionnaire. So a scientist would give a questionnaire to the test subject on paper, and in doing so would accidentally knock over a cup of pens, as you can see in this image here. And what they really studied was how quickly does the test participant stand up to pick up the pens, and how many pens does the test participant pick up for the researcher. That is weird. What does that have to do with flying in a virtual environment or having your arms up or down? Well, what Robin Rosenberg hypothesized, and what she studied, and what she found to exist, was the following. If you fly over a city with your arms up, what does that unconsciously remind you of? Do you know what? Superman. It reminds you of being Superman. It gives you the feeling of being Superman. This doesn't give you the feeling of being Superman. This does. And Superman has a lot of pro-social behavior. He helps people. And apparently, if people fly over a city in virtual reality with their arms up, the implicit association with Superman makes him exhibit more pro-social behavior than when they stand like this. So the people who stood like this picked up more pens and more quickly than the people who didn't. Well, this is a well-known study. It's not from us. It's from Robin Rosenberg. And what this student of ours, Martin, said is, and it's a smart question, he said, do you know what, I wonder? He said, could it be that if you do this, that you not only become more pro-social, but actually become stronger? Does feeling like Superman actually physically make you stronger? Cool question, we thought. So yes, study this. So that was his graduation work. So this student, Martin, studied that. And the way he did it was the following. He put test participants in a virtual reality environment via one of these helmets. And the environment that they stood in was a room. And the room had 3 mirrors. So the test participants that stood like this looked around and saw themselves reflected in the mirror. However, the self-image reflected in the mirror was either that of Superman, so they would see their own body as Superman, or see their own body as the average Dutch male of 18 years and older, which we found out the Central Bureau of Statistics gives a description. So our student implemented it, and apparently the average Dutch male looks like this, wears shorts and a t-shirt or something. All the test participants were male. And after people experienced themselves in this virtual environment as Superman or the average Joe, he would subject his test participants to a planking exercise. And this is a planking exercise. I had previously never heard of it. But apparently this is really difficult. And he would measure how long can people sustain this planking exercise. And this is a common measure of physical exertion in science. This is a way to measure how strong people are at a specific moment. And his hypothesis of our student was that these people who would experience themselves as Superman would be stronger than these people, the average Joes. Well, it turns out that in a way, yes, on average, these showed up to be stronger, but not statistically significant, meaning that you cannot draw that conclusion, right? This is how science works. That is not a problem in itself. This is beautiful research, a research that I really liked. It's a student that came up with this question from another study, from a study he'd heard of, changed the question into something that he wants to know and actually did it. It's a nice example of what MediaTech stands for. It's personal interest in the student. But realize that both examples that I gave you are actual academic studies. This is the thesis title of Martin Lodewijk's work. And if you look at the program, it is about actual scientific research. You are trained as a research academic. So you investigate science, you get the right papers, quite many actually. You actually do research. Some of our students go to conferences. So all these issues are involved in our program. But as you've seen, it's also about doing what you want to do, your personal inspiration. And to help students in that, aspects like media arts festivals, we visit those with our students. We talk a lot about the role of media, conceptual views on arts and arts and music, for example. We have a playful and inspiring approach. So this is one other aspect of our study. And finally, we feel that you can study stuff, you can want to study stuff, you can ask questions, but you need to be able to do it yourself. So this is why we have this technological layer in our program. It enables students to be self-sufficient, autonomous, self-capable researchers, to build their own test equipment, to build their own test environments, be it virtual reality, drones, whatever, with technology. Digital filters, video filters, anything. So that's why we teach them the role of technology. We teach them technological skills. That's why we deal with things like installations and create stuff. And we have very open projects in which they can define their own questions and actually do it. So these are 3 aspects: the science by doing and technology, the personal inspiration, a role of creativity, and the fact that we actually operate in actual scientific research as actual scientists. These are the core concepts of the MediaTech program. Well, if these are the core concepts, that just says what we want to achieve. But let's look a little bit about how we achieve this. So then you come into more bare facts, basically. For example, it's interesting for those who didn't know yet, it's organized by the Leiden Institute of Advanced Computer Science. It's the Computer Science Institute of the university. And it's embedded in that institute. However, it's formally collaboration with the Royal Academy of Arts and the Royal Conservatory, the Royal Music School in The Hague. And why is that the case? Because these institutes have a very long tradition in dealing with concepts such as personal inspiration, creativity, playfulness, that is part of their fiber, part of their structure, part of the academic structure of these institutes, part of their social structure. And we copy that into a computer science institute to train our students to become these creative and inspiring, self-inspired, self-capable academics. It's a 2-year program, meaning if you're familiar with ECTS system, it's a 120 ECTS program. It's a full-time program. It's simply 5 days a week. It is possible to have a job for maybe 1 day per week, but then you still need a little flexibility on that job. But simply say, I want to study this in 1 or 2 days per week, that's not possible. It's fully in English, and although the percentage of international students kind of varies per year, over the last few years it's been roughly 40% international students, so non-Dutch students from all over the world, from within Europe, from outside Europe. The female-male ratio is roughly 60% females, 40% males, and once you complete the program, you're given a Master of Science degree. These are just some dry facts that I want to show you. So if this is a 2-year program, what do these 2 years look like, right? Let's first look at the first year. First year is about compulsory courses. In the first year, I think, but I'm a lecturer, I'm not one of the students, it's fairly full. It's full year with courses. You have quite many courses. These are the courses. Every line here is one of the courses. And all these are done in the first year. So we start with a visit to the Ars Electronica Media Arts Festival. Festival for Kunst und Medientechnologie, I think, no? Kunst und Gesellschaft. We go there with our students. It's a very inspiring place, and it teaches you the relation between arts and science. These courses are about being an academic, about functioning in an academic environment. These courses help you in that. They teach you that. They teach you what it means, what scientific research is, what it means to do it, what methods, what constraints, what limitations, etc., etc. These courses make you self-sufficient. They focus on technology, on technological skills. By doing these courses, you have this technological basis that enables you to actually do your research. Things you conceive to actually realize it, which we find very important. We can teach you how to use a hammer. Would be very useful. We can teach you how to maybe weld, lossen in Dutch, which can be very useful, but it's not as useful as understanding digital technology. That is, at this moment in the world, the most flexible tool. So we teach you to use digital technology, both in hardware, to connect the outside world to your computer, and both in software, so within the computer. These courses are about the role of media, conceptual courses. They're about thinking conceptually about technologies, about things, conceptual thinking training. I would call it that way, conceptual thinking in media. These courses could create a human context around the technology and the media context that these other courses teach. The role of the human in there. What does it mean? What interaction affordances exist when you combine sound with space and humans? But what about human-computer interaction? All these things create a human context around all these other courses. So this is the first year. All these courses you do in the first year, it's quite full, I can tell you. And realize also that most of these courses contain some form of project, right? It can be a project in class, it can be a project in lab, it can be a project at home, but very often these projects have open assignments. So they allow you to fill in the exact form of what you want to do yourself. So the assignments are relatively open and very often are about somehow creating a product, be it a written product or a physical product or an interactive product. So that's something to realize in these courses. If that's the first year, then what is the second year? Well, the second year splits up in two parts, the third semester and the fourth semester. Third semester, so that's the first semester of the second year, is mainly about elective courses. And elective courses are courses that you can choose. And this is an exemplary list. This is not, we don't have a list of elective courses you can choose from because you can choose anything you want. So there's no point in having a list. Anything. As long as it's a master course and as long as it contributes to what you want to learn. And so this semester is really preparing you towards graduation. Because if you want to graduate on a research around a very specific topic, then students use this space, this educational space, to prepare themselves on this topic, to learn a little extra about artificial intelligence, to learn a little extra about animal behavior, to learn a little extra about, I don't know, design of interactive systems, whatever. So this is an opportunity for you to focus, specialize more towards the research project that you want to do for your graduation. Also, in the same semester, there's the exhibition project. It's basically, we ask our students to create an experience for an audience in an annual public exhibition. So there's a public exhibition where people can go in and out. And students create works in that exhibition that create an audience, that provide the audience with an experience. Meaning it can be interactive installations, but it can also be performances, film. And this teaches our students alternative forms of output. Creation, thinking about an audience. If, as a scientist, you need to be able to tell your story. What is the traditional form that scientists use, that academics use? It's written paper and it's conference presentations. Those are very limited forms. If you want to think about other forms of bringing your message, then this project teaches you how to do this, how to think about how to translate a statement or a message into an experience for a broader audience. And these works are very varied. Very often they're interactive installations, but they don't have to be. For example, this is a work by Dagmar and Jasper. And for their semester project, for their exhibition experience, what they created was, what they wanted to people to experience is that things that we take for very much for granted, for example, coffee, can be in reality very much different than you would expect. So they created a transparent coffee. They literally did this. They experimented with distillation, with all these biochemical processes, and were capable of creating a small little glass vials with a very fully transparent fluid looking like water, feeling like coffee. It was warm. When you opened it, it smelled like coffee, and when you downed it like that, it tasted like coffee. And this is something that we allow in this project. Not even this, we actually like this. This is the kind of, this shows you how the breadth of this particular project, what we are willing to accept and what we teach you. So if this is all elective courses and this exhibition project is the first half of the second year, what's the second half? Well, you're on your own then. Well, that sounds worse than it is. You're not. You're being supervised by 2 professors. But you're doing a personal graduation research. You're doing that alone. And you ask your own scientific question. You do your own academic research from start to finish. It's not the research of a professor in which you participate. No, it's your research. You are the principal investigator. You're the boss of the research. This is a term used in academia for whoever is in charge of the research, who gets to make the final decisions. It's you as a student. The professors, 2 professors who support you, are basically your advisors, but you are the principal investigator. So it's really a study by the student themselves, like we saw with the drone and the birds, like we saw with the Superman project. Right? It's the student in charge. The student comes up with the concepts and the questions and the methods. But it is real, actual research, not just making something. It's really doing research, answering knowledge questions, generating new knowledge in the world. Although you often make something, often it has a component that could be called a product, either written or physical or interactive or digital, but still it's actual research. And you end with a short scientific style paper, short meaning 8 to 18 pages of academic writing, right? Not a long, lengthy thesis, scriptie as we call them in Dutch, that are horrible to read and horrible to write. We write short, but it's difficult, but it's nice. Let me give you an example of one of these research projects, right? Another one. So this is one by a student called Sophie Rust. And what Sophie had an interest after watching a documentary on television in Botox treatment. You know what Botox treatment is? They inject basically a toxic chemical into your facial muscles to paralyze them. by which you lose basically the wrinkles. And it's a beauty treatment. And Sophie was interested in this. And her question was, could it be that if you subject yourself to Botox treatment, that this disappearing of these wrinkles in your face actually lowers your emotional expressiveness? So your capability of expressing emotion in what you say. When I heard this, I thought, that's a very logical question. That must have been asked before. That must have been studied before. It turns out, no. It was never studied before. So here's a student from our program who says, I'm going to study that. So she contacted Holland's foremost Botox doctor, Michael Schiers. And he said, okay, I'll happily help you. I'll provide the Botox at cost. I'll even inject it for you. But this is the moment where we, as a university, stepped in and said, no, you cannot just inject your friends with Botox for the sake of science. That's not allowed. So, but it doesn't end there. What Sophie then did was really smart. She created a digital video filter. And it's difficult to see on this projection screen, I realize this, but if you would see this on a normal screen, you would see that this image has lines here and also here a little bit that have disappeared here. And the same, this guy has a few lines, I can't see it really on this screen, but here that have disappeared. So it's a digital video filter. She could throw in a video of someone speaking and it would digitally manipulate it and take away the wrinkles. This video filter, she had confirmed by this famous Botox doctor that this was literally very strongly the effect that Botox has on the human face. So it was validated by a real Botox doctor as being the digital equivalent of actual Botox treatment. Not only that, he actually uses this filter now to prepare his patients. And so what she then did is she had people memorize a story and tell that story in front of a camera. People like her, people like him. And she had other test participants listen to this story. And through some elaborate scheme, known as a transmission chain, that scientists, that academics use, she could determine the amount of emotional ladenness, how much emotional content is in the story that was told. And this is a way that academics use this elaborate scheme to measure how emotional is the content of what these people say. And she compared the situation where they were not treated with a digital filter, with a situation where they were treated. And she found that indeed, statistically significantly, the videos that were treated with digital Botox carried less emotional content than the ones that weren't. They were the same videos. So apparently, yes, Botox takes away your emotional expressiveness. And she showed this. This had not before been studied. It was studied now by her in a very smart way, I think. I really like this research as something that she came up with, she did, she investigated, and it's a very nice result. Another research project by one of our students deals with context-dependent memory. And context-dependent memory, by the way, this is the thesis title of Sophie's thesis. I forgot to say that. So another study by a student deals with context-dependent memory. Context-dependent memory is an effect where if you learn something in one environment, memorize something in one environment, for example, underwater, then if you change environment, for example, you go above water, it's more difficult to recall what you learned than when you stay in the original environment. This is an effect that's well studied years ago, for example, by Godden and Baddeley, who did study it with divers above water and underwater. It doesn't matter if you learn the information underwater or above water, but to recall it, it's best to be in the same context. This has also been studied for being drunk or sober. If you learn something, memorize something while being drunk, it's best to be drunk at the test also. It's better, easier to recall the information then. Or if you're sober during learning, it's best to be sober during the exam as well, right? So multiple contexts have been studied. But this is an example of an environmental context. The environment makes a difference. If you change environment, it's more difficult to recall what you've memorized. What student Mike Lanen, a student from ours, wondered, he said, okay, if this is the case, we know this is the case for different environments, not just this one. Would it also be the case where if you change from a virtual environment, virtual reality, to a real environment? And that's a relevant question, because if that is the case, if it's more difficult to recall information that you've learned in virtual reality when you're outside virtual reality, that may challenge a paradigm that's being explored currently very often, which is using virtual reality in education. A lot of institutes are looking towards virtual reality to teach students in education. But could it be that maybe it's not a good idea? This is what the question that one of our students asked, Mike Lane. So he set up this experiment where people had to memorize things either in a virtual environment that was an identical copy of the real environment, or in the real environment without looking in the virtual environment. And it was a cross-tabulated study. So some people had to learn in the virtual environment and then recall in the virtual environment or in the other environment, and vice versa. And he found out that it does make a big difference. It makes a huge difference. It makes a very big difference. If you change environment between virtual and real or from real to virtual, you lose on average 17% of your recall capability. If you move from virtual to real, you lose actually 24%. 24% less recall accuracy when moving from virtual to real as opposed to virtual to virtual. That means that it is in fact maybe not a good idea to use virtual reality for education, which is something that no one ever studied. And this is such an interesting result that 2 weeks ago, actually less than 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, this is our student Mike, presented his thesis at an international conference on virtual reality. So people from all over the world flew into London to discuss the newest results in virtual reality, and among them was our student, Mike, who came up with this idea, who studied this, and who found that it does make a big difference when you put off this virtual reality helmet or put it on. It may seem like all these projects are very technologically oriented. Well, many are, but that's not because they have to be. That's because students like that. Students want to do that. That's fine. They come up with the questions. So we're not in control in that aspect. But it doesn't have to be that way. To show you that it doesn't, we had a student called Hanna Schraffenberger whose complete graduation research was writing a book. Simply writing the book, reflecting on the writing process, thinking about what to write. It was a book called Whether You Like Art or Not, Short Essays on the Liking of Modern Art. The act of writing this book was her graduation research. We are open to other forms of academic research. We consider this academic research also, as long as you do it properly as an academic, as long as you think about it. So this is also possible. So it also may seem that the breadth of all the projects is really big. Birds, drones, Superman, virtual reality, writing a book, Botox. Yeah, but realize that's because I'm showing you projects from different students. If you're a single student, you're obviously focusing on one thing. So realize this. It's not a complete, of course it's a broad program, but from the vantage point that you have in this room listening to me presenting these projects, it would appear to be more all over the place than it would appear to be when you were one of our students. So, who are these students I'm talking about? I've mentioned some names, but you know nothing about them, right? So let me tell you a little bit about our students. They all have a scientific interest, and this is a list of let's say, characterizations of our students that really hold for our students. There's 2 over there, and I can vouch that every point holds for them and our other students. They have a scientific interest, an academic interest, otherwise they wouldn't be here. They are conceptual and critical thinkers. We select them for this. They're not afraid of new ideas, and they like to create stuff. It is important that they have technical affinity. We want them to be in charge of their own research, to be able to create their own research setups, their experimental setups, whatever they need to be able to make it themselves. So they all have technical affinity. And they are creative. They don't all play piano, guitar, or paint. That's not required, but they have a level of creativity that extends the regular, I would say. And if you look at these characterizations of our students, you'll see they're similar in our staff. We are all researchers, so very strongly rooted in academia. We do have very varied backgrounds. I'm a computer scientist. Etienne is a sonologist. Tessa is a language evolutionist. Is that a good word? Linguistic? No, I don't know. Something like that. So we're very different. We have very varied backgrounds. Many of us work outside the university as well. When I'm not at the university, I'm a game designer. I work for a game design company. Etienne, when he's not at the university, is a sound artist. And many of us have tasks outside the university as well. We all create stuff. We all have technical affinity, and we are all creative in the sense that we like to think differently about things that we encounter. So, if these are our staff, and I've shown you our students, how do these students get into the program? Let me tell you a little bit about the admissions of our program. So you need a bachelor degree. Not at the moment when you apply, but at the moment when the program starts, you need to have a bachelor degree. If you don't have it, you cannot enter. The bachelor degree, we call that in Dutch alpha, beta, gamma. That means it can be of any type. It can be a humanities bachelor's degree. It can be University of Applied Sciences, what we call HBO in Dutch. It can be from an art school. It can be mathematics, it can be psychology, it can be philosophy, it can be even be dentistry. I wouldn't know why, but it could. And we have roughly, so we have a very heterogeneous, very broad community of students with very varied backgrounds. We have roughly 30 students per year, for your information, because we select them. And the selection is based, this admission selection is based mainly on your statement of motivation. Why do you want to study media technology? And does that match with what we do? Is there firm and solid and good and proper understanding of what we do? And does that match what you want to do? We look at your CV and your prior grades as well. If you live in Holland, you are required to have an interview with the admission board. We use the results of this interview also for your admission selection. If you're not from Holland, if you don't live in Holland, then we can request a Skype interview. You need to demonstrate that you have affinity with science and technology. You don't have to be able to program, but you need to be able to learn the program. So you need some affinity. You need to show us that you are capable of learning it somehow. You also need to show us that you want to learn it, because it is an essential part of our program, this affinity with science and technology. And you need, obviously, to have a sufficient level of English, for which we have criteria that will be tested, either through an IELTS test or a TOEFL test, or if you're from a Dutch high school and Dutch university or University of Applied Sciences, you're exempt. You don't have to test your English. So these are admission criteria. Finally, there's an interesting question. Why study this program here? Why at Leiden University? Why not go somewhere else? Well, that's an interesting question I want to talk about a little bit. The way in which we focus on the creative process in an academic environment, on this personal inspiration, this freedom of academic research, but actual academic research, is unique in the Netherlands and in Europe. It simply doesn't exist. Other programs combine academia and technology, yes, but not in the way we do. We're exploring this creative process in academia in combination with technology is really media tech. We are open to all possible educational backgrounds, as long as it's minimally a bachelor degree. We are a very broad university, and that is to your benefit. The fact that there are biologists here, there's chemists here, there's psychologists, there's a whole humanities department with linguistics and all these interesting fields. Students can use that to their advantage. They can contact these people, they can walk by, they can do elective courses there. So that really helps. And if you're not from Holland, I can say that it's an interesting environment to study in the Netherlands. It's open, it's inspiring. And studying the media tech program prepares you for a career in, basically that involves creative thought and creative thinking, critical thinking. And typically our students end up in what is known as creative industry, which is basically, maybe a better word would be creative technology, right? They're often the people who come up with the ideas for technology. They often work for creative industry companies that, for example, create museum exhibits or create other forms of relatively small companies often that create interesting forms, new things with technology. Also, students work for larger companies, but this is a large section of a large, what's the word? A large section of industry where our students end up. And a rather large proportion of our students actually become academic researchers themselves. We also see that we score very high on this criterion as well. Well, that is what I wanted to tell you for now.